All right, today's daf is Masechta Sanhedrin Daf Tzadik Beis 92. There we go. We're going to start from we're discussing the topic of Tchias HaMesim, and we're going to start from 91 Tzadik Aleph Amud Beis. Just when the lines get wide. Okay, so here comes a couple of ideas. We're talking about Tchias HaMesim. The question is, what happens for all those people that died, and in most people that die sick? What's going to happen to them? So the Gemara says like this: Rish Lakish Rami. Rish Lakish asked a contradiction in Psukim. Ksiv, it says in the pasuk, Bam Iva Pesach Harav Yoledes Yachtav. Hi, hold up. Hi, Alan. We just began. So Rish Lakish and Tzadik Aleph Amud Beis. Rish Lakish had a contradiction. It says in the pasuk that during the time of Tchias HaMesim, people, the blind and the lame, are going to get up, along with someone who is pregnant and someone who gave birth. Uksiv, then the pasuk says, by Tchias HaMesim, Oz Yedalik Ayol Piseach, they're going to jump like a little deer, like a little a ram. Piseach, the one that was lame, with the Sarein Lashain Elaim, the one that could not speak, will be able to speak. Kinifku b'midbar mayim, in the desert there's going to be an explosion of water, and the dry places will run with rivers. So Haketzet, how do you resolve? Are people going to be healed or are not going to be healed when the Tchias HaMesim happens? Says the Gemara, we can resolve it. Haketzet oimdim b'muman u'misrapim. They get up with their failings, and then they get healed right away. And that's what we say in davening every day. We talk about Mechayim Esim Ba'ato Barachamim Rabim, Soymech Noiflim, V'roifech Choilim, Umatir Asurim. So when you think about that, we're not talking about the sick person. We're talking about the sick person that died, who's going to get up in Tchias HaMesim. He's going to wobble at first, so God's going to hold him up. Then God's going to heal him, and then Matir Asurim, he'll be able to move around. That's the pshat in the first bracha. Ula Rami. Ula asked the contradiction. See if it says in the pasuk, that means eventually there'll be a time when nobody's going to die anymore. Uksiv, and nobody's going to cry. Uksiv, then the pasuk says, that a young person is going to die at 100 years old in the future world. What do you mean? And that's going to be a young, like a life cut short. So from that pasuk, it seems that people are going to die in the future world. So loy kasha, that's not so difficult. Kam b'Yisrael, Jews who get up Tchias HaMesim are never going to die. Kam b'goyim that are around, they're going to live for a long time, but they're going to eventually die. Says the Gemara, v'goyim my boy hasam. Why is a goy getting up to Tchias HaMesim and olam haba? And says the Gemara, hanach t'ksibahu v'amdu zarim v'ro tzeinchem v'nei necha ikarechem v'karmechem. They're going to be around to take care of your sheep and your vineyards and your fields. So we need a goy to help with that. Of course, you're going to need a Shabbos goy and a Shabbos help. So of course, that's what the goyim are going to be there for. Says the Gemara, Rav Chizda Rami. Rav Chizda says, ask the contradiction. Let's say Ksiv, the pasuk says, by the future world, that the sun and the moon are going to be so dimmed because God is going to be the king, and it's going to be so apparent that God's the king. Uksiv, and the pasuk says, in the future world, we're going to have the sun going to be, the moon is going to be like the sun, as light as the sun, and the sun is going to be 7 times as light as it is today. But there will be the moon and the sun. So how do you resolve those two psukim? Answers the Gemara Lekasha, that's not so difficult. In the Moisei Mashiach, there's going to be the sun and the moon, but in the Olam Haba, the sun and the moon are going to be so dimmed because we're going to be benefiting from the light of the Shekhinah, so to speak. According to Shmuel, that says that there is no such a thing of Yemois HaMashiach. The only difference is the Yemois HaMashiach will be like it is today, except that Israel will be a superpower. But other than that, the life will be. So how's Shmuel going to resolve these two psukim? Lakasha, it's not so difficult. They're both talking about Olam Haba. Kam b'machna tzadikim. In the camp of tzadikim, then there's going to be a sun and the moon, just they're going to be a lot stronger. Kan in Olam Haba b'machne shchina, where around the presence of God, then the sun and the moon are going to be so dim they're going to be ashamed because the presence of God is going to be felt. Okay, hi Lewis, we're just on Tzadik Aleph of Beis, catching up towards the last part of the page. Rava Rami, Rava had a contradiction. Ksiv, it says in the pasuk, Ani omis v'achaya. I cause people to die, says God, but I'll make them come back alive. Uksiv, the pasuk says, Mechatzti, I made them sick, v'ani arapeh, and I'm going to heal them. Amar HaKadosh Baruch Hu, this is exactly what God said. Mashani meimis ani michaya. Whoever is going to I put to death, I'm going to bring them back to life. V'hader, and then after I bring them back to life, even though they went to their death sick, Masha mechatzti, what I made them sick, v'ani arapeh, I'm going to heal them. That means that anybody who went with a sickness is going to come back healed. Panarabonim, ani amas v'achai, yochos te misa be'echad b'chaim be'echad, k'der shoylam noik, talmud loyme mechatzti v'ani erpa, ma mechitzu refu be'echad, af misa b'chaim be'echad. So the pasuk, from that pasuk in Devarim, in Sefer Devarim, I would think that God in the future world will put one person to death and bring another person to life. So just like healing and sickness and healing is referring to one person, so also the death and coming back alive is that same person that died is going to come back alive. So again, we're always looking for sources that the Torah hints about this concept of the resurrection. Mekan, tshuva, this is an answer to those that say, oh, there's no reference to the resurrection of the dead in the Torah. There's plenty of references. Tanya, here's another one. Rabbi Meir said, where do I see the reference to Tchias Mesim in the Torah? Shenema, the pasuk says, Oz Yashir Moshe v'nei Yisrael Shir Zois Lashem. Then Moshe Rabbeinu will sing. Sharloi Nemar, it doesn't say Moshe sung the Shira, El Yasha, he will sing. Mekan, from here we see Tchias Mesim in the Torah, that the resurrection of the dead are coming back. God, Moshe Rabbeinu will come back and re-sing the Shira. You say the same idea. Oz Yivna Yeshua Mizbeach Hashem. Then Yeshua built a Mizbeach to the Eibishter. Bonale Nembar, it doesn't say Yeshua built a Mizbeach, an altar. El Yivna, he will build. Yeshua is going to come back and rebuild another Mizbeach. Elamiyata, if that's what you want to learn Pshat, what does it mean? Oz Yivna Shlomo, Bama. Shlomo built like a private altar, Lichmoish, to avoid Zara called Kmoish, Shikutz Moyev, the disgusting Avodah Zara of Moyev. Is Shlomo going to come back and rebuild an altar for an idol? That doesn't make sense. No, the Gemara says that's not the pshat, that pasuk. At that time, Shlomo didn't build a bama. His wives built the bama, but because Shlomo didn't protest, and remember, Shlomo married 1,000 women, and they led his heart astray, and he didn't protest the evil things that they were doing, which was building altars to their idols. So therefore, it was considered that Shlomo built it himself. That's why it says in the future. So that's just an exception of that pasuk. Rabbi Shimon Levi, Menayel Tchias Mesim in the Torah. How do you know there's Tchias Mesim in the Tanakh? Shnema Asher Yoshua Yisecha Oid Yalu Chesel. Those that sit in your house will praise you forever. Hilalucha neinema doesn't say they praised you in the past tense. Ela yahalalucha, they will praise you. Those that spend their time sitting in your house in this world, so to speak, in the shuls and whatever, will eventually say Hillel, Hallel in the future world. The that people are going to come back and say and say Hallel. The Amar Rabbi Shua Levi, Rabbi Shua says, "Call ha'oimer shira b'olam hazeh." If anyone says shira in this world, he will re-say a shira in the next world. So Shnema Ashrei Yoshvei V'Secha, those that can say in this world a shira, Oid Yalu Cheselo, they will eventually have the merit to say shira in the next world. Amar Kinina Chia Bar Abba Rabbi Yochanan, Menayel of Tchias Mesim in the Torah. How do you know again? Tchias Mesim is in the Tanakh. Shnema, the pasuk says, Kol Tzavayach Nasu Kol Yachtov Yiranenu. The voice of the seers, of the prophets, raise their voice in unison, and they sang loudly. Rinenu loynema, it doesn't say they sang loudly, el yiranenu, they will sing. That all these prophets are going to come back and we'll sing to the Eibishter. So we see again another idea of Tchias HaMesim. All the Nevi'im are going to come sing Shira like one voice in unison. Shenema kol tzafayach nasu kol yachtov. All those voices of the prophets will be able to raise their voice in unison, like in unity. Even though when you read the Tanakh all sounds that they were written by different people, and they weren't said by Nevuah. It doesn't sound like it, right? But because they're written in different styles. But in the future world, you'll see that how it's all put together, because they're going to all say Shira in unison, in unity. Now, now the Gemara just digresses into another topic. When you teach Torah, and everybody has a chiyuv, there's an obligation to teach somebody who Torah. It's not just a rabbi. Everybody has an obligation. It says vishinantam, you have to teach the Torah. So when you teach somebody, you have to make sure that you have the patience to teach it well. So the Rabbi Yehuda Marav says, Kol hamanei halacha mipi Talmud. He holds back from explaining a halacha to his student, and the student can't repeat it. Sometimes you can hear something, but you can't repeat it until so you need a patient teacher to make sure that the student can repeat it. And so if you hold back teaching a student that way, so kilu goizlim menachos avosav, you steal his inheritance. And when you steal somebody's legacy, that's even worse than stealing something that he bought, so to speak. Because the inheritance of the Jewish people is the Torah. Torah tziva lanu Moshe Marasha Kilas Yaakov. That's our inheritance. Marasha si l'chol Yisrael Mesheshis me'abreshis. From when God created the world, when He created the Torah, He designated the Torah for the Jewish people. So if you know some Torah and you have to teach it to somebody, and you don't teach it to that person well, you're actually stealing from that person. Amrav Chana Babizna Amrav Shimon Chasida, same idea. But Kol Amanea Halach Mipi Talmud. Even an embryo in their mother's stomach cursed that person, because the embryo is being taught Torah by the angel. So if you and even though the embryo can't repeat back what he's learned, but the malach is teaching him patiently over 9 months. So if you don't teach somebody, the embryos in mother's stomachs will curse you. Shnama manea bar, if you hold back bar food, which is spiritual food. We go to Amid Aleph. Yikvu oim, ein la'oim ela or ubrim. The ubrim, the embryos are going to curse. Shnama la'oim ela miyamatz. That oim refers to an embryo. Then kaveh ela klola, and the word kaveh means curse. Shnama ma'akev lekabel kel. Ein bar ela Torah shnam nashkivar penyana. So that's how we learned the remez of the pasuk, how a person who doesn't teach correctly, the embryos in the mother's stomach will curse them. Now, you think that if you know Torah and you don't teach it, you'll remember it. So the Gemara says something even more astounding. They make holes like a sieve in you. Yikvu means they make you a hole for that person. Like the washer's net, where water spills out in all the tiny little holes. Now, the point of the Gemara is like this, that you think that if you don't teach it, at least you know it. No. So, Torah is something funny, that if you don't teach it, you actually lose it, and you could lose a lot at one shot. So you always have to have like a connection with somebody where you're actually teaching Torah, so that you can maintain the Torah that you learn. If you do teach somebody Torah and you teach it patiently to somebody, what is your reward? You're like Yosef HaTzadik. Yosef became the king. And the reason why Yosef was the king, because he fed his brothers during the time of hunger. So you're feeding somebody who's hungry and doesn't have the ability to find somebody to teach him. And if you're the one, you teach him, you get the blessings that Yosef HaTzadik got. Shnema uvracha l'roish mashbia. The ein mashbia el Yosef. Bracha goes to the head of the one that dishes out his learning. The ein mashbia el Yosef. And mashbia refers to Yosef. Shnema of Yosef hu hashalit al aretz hu mashbia lechol hamaretz. He fed the entire world. Ama Rav Sheshes kol hamlamet Torah ba'oimel hazeh. someone who teaches Torah in this world, which should be everybody. You think, okay, now I did it in this world. You'll merit to teach it in the next world. In the next world, they'll put you up with a chavrusa that needs your assistance to be teaching, and that's a big merit. Back to the sugya of Tchias HaMesim. Amar Rava Menayim Tchias HaMesim in the Torah. How do you know Tchias HaMesim in the Torah? Shnema, the pasuk says, Yechiru Uvein Bal Yamus. Reuven will live. Yechiru Uvein Ba'al Yom Hazeh in this world. The Al Yamois, he will not die La'olam Haba in the future world, because Yaakov said, although Reuven did a big sin, but now he's gonna get up by Tchias HaMesim. Ravina Alma Mahacha, I have a pasuk that says, "V'rabim miyesheni admas offer." The many that are sleeping in the ground, yakutsu will get up. Eil l'chay olam. These are going to get to live forever. The eil l'charafis lidroin olam. These for shame and for damnation forever. So therefore, here's a pasuk in the Niyal, not well learned, that hints about Tchias HaMesim. Ravashi Alma Mahacha. Ravashi says another pasuk in the Niyal. You're going to go down to sleep and rest, but you're going to get up to your lot at the end of days. Again, and the same idea. Amar Rabbi Lazar said, if you find a leader that leads the leader leads the congregation with ease, pleasantness, then he'll be the leader of that group in Olam Haba. So it's Yinahagim, those that have Rachmanis and are who have compassion to their congregation. Yinahagim will lead them in the future world. So you don't have to worry about firing the rabbi, the parnas, because if he's good, he's going to be the same one in Olam Haba. Now, V'amar Rabbi Lazar said, Gedoyla Deya. It's so important for a person to have Deya. Deya means awareness, wisdom, insight into your own spiritual soul, that you are a soul. And the Hashem said that it's so important to have that das. Hashem put the word das between two words of God to show how important this concept is. The Amar Rabbi Lazar says, the Beis Hamikdash was so important to the Jewish spirituality, God put it right in between his two names. So you see the word Migdash appeared in between two of God's name. Maskef la Rav Ada Kachinoi, Rav Ada asked, who's from Kachinoi, Al Miata Gedoyle Nekomosh Nitna Ben Shtei Oisias, Shnema Kel Nekomois Hashem, Kel Nekomois Haifia. So the Kamais appears twice in this pasuk, and there's two Shem Hashems. We could put the Nekamis in between. The word Nekama appears in between Kel and Hashem, and it appears twice. What's so good about God taking revenge and paying people back? Amalei. So who answered back? Rabbi Lazar answered back to Rav Ada. Lemilsa hachinami. Sometimes it's good to have as God takes revenge or pays people back. Kiduula the amaula shtei afiyas halalu lama. Why does God appear twice? Why does he reveal himself twice? Lama achas lemidas toiva, for doing good, to pay people back for all their hard work in this world. Achas lemidas ra parani is to pay back those that did bad. So nekama is not necessarily a bad thing. Sometimes nekama is a good thing. Well, Amar Rabbi Lazar said, "Kol Adam sheyesh b'deya." If a person has awareness and is in tune with his spirituality, is in tune with his soul, Ki'ila nivna Beis Hamikdash b'yamav. It's as if the Beis Hamikdash is around. The whole point of the Beis Hamikdash was to make you become aware of your own infinite. So, but if a person does that on his own, it's as if he built the Beis Hamikdash. So they're both given between the two Isis of Hashem. It's so important, these two concepts in Judaism. The Amar Rabbi Lazar says, "Kol Adam sheyesh b'deya." If you have spiritual awareness within yourself, the soif masashe, you'll become wealthy. Shenema uvidas chadarim yamalu kol han Yaakov v'noam. Either through das, you'll be filled with all things that are precious and beautiful. So it means that first of all, if you're aware, you have the daya, you'll know to ask to pray to God, and you'll know to be happy in your lot. So in the end, if you work on your spirituality and your daya, then you'll become wealthy. Now the Rabbi Lazar goes even further in the other direction. The Rabbi Lazar says, "Kol adam she'ein b'daya." If a person has no spiritual awareness, we're talking about somebody who was given all the opportunities and of life, and he just partied hard, I guess, became an addict, a homeless. So you then also l'rachim alav. You're not allowed to have compassion on such people. We often think that you should have to have compassion on everybody, but Rabbi Lazar is teaching us that if a person has no daya, he has no spiritual awareness, he doesn't work on himself, then you're not allowed to have rachmanis on him. So he brings a pasuk that shows that you're not supposed to have compassion on such a people. Not only that, you give these homeless guys a bread to eat, you think you're doing a good thing. So the Rabbi Lazar says just the opposite. Called if you give your bread to this person who has no daya, again, a person who destroyed his soul, Yisurim Barnalav, the person that gave him bread, he will suffer. Shnema lachmecha yasimu mozar tachtacha ein tvuna boy. Which means that because you gave your bread to somebody who has no ein tvuna, mozar, you'll get back suffering. Because God doesn't want you. God gave this person the opportunity, and you're probably better off not supplying him to continue on that path. A person who has no sense to his spirituality, he will go into exile. He'll end up being tossed out of his place because God will shake you up, so to speak, so you become aware that you're not just a body, you're a soul. Rabbi Lazar taught another teaching. If a person doesn't learn Torah in his house at night, a fire of Gehenna will destroy him. Which means that a guy during the darkness, and he doesn't light up, let's say, a candle to learn Torah, right? Or take a little glass of wine and then relax and learn some Torah, then the fire that you don't need to fan, which is the fires of Gehenna, will destroy him, because he just wants to remove himself from ever becoming a Talmud Chacham. Rabbi Lazar said, if you don't let Talmid Chachamim benefit from your possessions, you don't see a simon bracha in that possessions. So if you have an apartment or a car or something that you could let a Talmid Chacham use it, kol kavod, you'll see a simon bracha in that, in your possessions. Shnema ein srid la'achlei al kein yochel tovai. Ein srid al Talmid Chacham shnema v'srid masher Hashem karei. If you don't bring a sarid, which is a Talmid Chacham, to eat and to benefit from your possessions, then you don't get good things happening to you. V'yamar Rabbi Lazar taught us, kol she'enim mishaya pas al shulchanai, which is halach and Shulchan Aruch, that before you bench, you have to leave over some pieces of bread. And that's why you say, haracham on you shlach lanu bracha meruba b'bayis hazeh. The al shulchan zeh shalchalnu alav, because that's the bread that you left over on the table. That's why you're not supposed to clean off the whole table and then bench. You should leave some challah on the table. Says the Gemara, Rabbi Lazar said the opposite. If you place a bread on your table after you finished eating, it's as if you served idols, because those that prepare to the god, which is an idol, a table, and they fill up something to drink to this other idol called lamni. So we see that you're not supposed to have bread on the table when you're finished eating. That's just the Gemara like kasha. If you bring a big piece of bread, like a whole challah, to the table, that's no good. That's what the idols would do. That they're now going to feed their avodah zarah. If you have just breadcrumbs, so then that's okay. Rab Lazar taught us, Kol hamachalif b'diburoi. Anybody who changes his words, I mean, he says insincere things, he's double-tongued, he's duplicitous. If You'll plisher this. He's like serving idols. He says something, but he means something sinister. So if you do that, you're like serving idols. Yaakov said, I don't want to look like a misateya. In yeshiva, we used to say it means a fupper, somebody, a faker. Misateya. That's why he didn't want to put on Esav's clothing to go take the brachas. Avodah zarah is also called masei tituim. So if you say something that people can misinterpret what you're saying, like Yaakov eventually said, it's almost as if you're serving idols. Now Rab Laza says an interesting thing. Rab Laza, call him a stachka be'erva. If someone looks at arayas, in other words, he looks at porn, kashtei in that eres, he'll have loyalenu, he won't be a potent, he'll have erectile dysfunction. Shenema eriyach te'er kashtecha. By looking at porn or whatever, te'er kashtecha, it will ruin your potency. The Omer Rab Laza said, "La'olam hebe kovel v'kayim." You should be somebody that's easygoing and somebody that's forgiving. V'kayim, then you'll live a long life. Omer Rab Zera, now Namtini, we see this idea. Base Abel ein poisul loichalonius v'yagusnigoy shmamino. There's a Mishnah that says that you don't see negoyim on a house if there's no light coming into the house, if it's a windowless room, because since it's windowless, so even though you could take a flashlight and see there's a neg on the wall, will not be matama that house. So again, if you don't, you close your eyes, you don't see every miscoming on somebody else, you'll live a long life. Shmamino. Omar Rav Tuvi, Omar Rav Yoshia. Rav Tuvi said in the name of Rav Yoshia. Okay, we'll learn another 5 more minutes. My diksiv, why does the pasuk say Sha'ol v'yitzurechem eretz lo'isava mayim v'chimai in sha'ol v'yitzurechem? The pasuk seems to compare the grave to the womb. Now, what does the grave have to do with the womb? So, just like the womb brings in and then brings out a baby, so also the grave brings in a dead body and brings out a live person. When you do relations with the womb, it's done privately. A baby is born with cries. The grave, where you bring a dead body and everybody is crying while they're burying the dead body, and it didn't. So when Tchias HaMesim is going to come, there's going to be loud singing, a loud noise. Yeah, again, here's a proof that there's Tchias HaMesim referenced in the Tanakh. Elio's Bryces taught us that tzaddikim who are going to come to life the first. Not everybody gets up at the same time. Let's say Avram, Yitzchak, Yaakov, they're going to get up right away. They're not going to turn back to dirt, because there's going to be a time when Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov are going to be walking around and nobody is going to be up yet. And then God's going to destroy the world and make it and rebuild the world. And then everybody's going to get up. So what's going to happen to Abraham, Yitzchak, Yaakov? They got up early. The answer is they're never going to get there. They're just going to hang around, and they're not going to come back to their dirt. Once they come alive, the people are going to call them holy. And just like holiness lasts forever, so once they become alive, let's say Abraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, they're going to last forever. We go to Amabez. So now, the entire those years that Hashem is going to rebuild the world. Again, let's say there's going to be an Armageddon, and the whole world is going to be destroyed. But yet, Avraham, Yitzchak, Yaakov already lived their Tchias HaMesim. They got up already. And how do you know there's going to be an Armageddon? Shnema, the pasuk is going to say, "V'niskav Hashem leba'ada b'yamehu." God is going to remain alone on that day. Tzaddikim mahein oisim. What are the tzaddikim going to do while God is alone? HaKadosh Baruch Hu oisilem kinafayim kinasharim. They're going to have wings like eagles. V'shatan al pnei kol hamayim. They're going to float around the oceans, because everything. I guess there's going to be a flood, like the great flood, and they're going to just be flying like a bird. Shnema alkein le'nira b'hamer eretz. They shouldn't be afraid when God will exchange the world again. But moitar b'leiv yamin, when the mountains are removed into the waters, there's going to be a flood. V'shem etami yesh lehem tsar. Aren't they going to be in pain? They're going to constantly be flying with no rest. Talmud Loimer, they're going to be like these birds that can fly thousands and thousands of miles, and they don't read. They don't read rest. Shnema v'koyvei Hashem yachlifa koyach yala elav kanasharim yirutzu lo yigo yechu lo yi'aful. So they're going to constantly be like eagles that could run and never get tired, go and never tire out. So that's what's going to happen to Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, or all tzaddikim that get up early when God is going to just make the Armageddon and destroy the world. Then these tzaddikim are going to fly around the world, over the waters. And then when God finishes rebuilding the world after 1,000 years, then everybody else is going to come back alive. Then there's going to be a total tchias mason. So it's a two-step process. Says the Gemara, why don't we learn from the dead that Yecheskel brought back alive? That Yecheskel in the Tanakh, during the time of Nebuchadnezzar, prior to him destroying the first Beis Hamikdash, Yecheskel was in Bavel, and somehow the pasuk describes that he brought dead people back to life, but then they ended up dying. And Yirmiyahu was in Yerushalayim saying that the Beis Hamikdash was going to be destroyed, but some already went into Galus early, and Yecheskel was one of them. And yet Yecheskel brought people back to life, and they died. So maybe Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov are going to come alive, and then they're going to eventually die. And says the Gemara, that really Yecheskel never brought anybody back to life. The Tanya, we learned in the Brisa, Reb Lezer says the people, the Yecheskel that who was brought back to life by Yecheskel, they stood up for a minute and then they said Shira and then they died. Ma Shira Amru, what Shira did they say? Hashem Emes B'Tzedem Mechaya Barachman. Shua Omer Shira Zu Amru Hashem Emes Mechaya Mer Shalvial. They said a pasuk and then they died. So that's that opinion. Rabbi Yehuda Emes Mashal Haya. It was really in a parable. Amalei Reb Nechemia Emes. If it's true, Lama Mashal. Why is it a parable? But Mashal Lama Emes. What do you mean Emes Mashal? It's true parable. And Gemara, Rabbi Yehuda meant to say El Emes Mashal Hi Haya. It was a mashal. So Rabbi Yehuda is the one that said it was a whole mashal. It was a whole parable. It never happened. So if it never happened, then they never got up and died. So Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, when they're going to get up, they're going to live forever. Comes along the Gemara, Rabbi Lezer ben Noish, Rabbi Yosef Li'oima, Mesim Shehechi Yecheskel, Ola Eretz Yisrael. The dead people that Yecheskel brought back to life, they actually moved to Israel. The Benasu Noshim, they got married to women. And they had children. Amar Rabbi Yehuda ben Meseir al Graglav, Rabbi Yehuda ben Meseir got on his feet and he said, Ani mibnei b'neiim. I am from their grandchildren. And here is the tefillin that my grandfather brought me from them. Okay, we're going to stop over here. So basically, you have three opinions over here. We have three opinions of who these Yecheskel brought back to life. Either they just got up and said Shira and they died, or either it never happened, and it's just a parable. And Rabbi Yehuda ben Meseir said, no, they actually got up and lived forever, and they had a nice family, and then they died, but they lived normally. And Rabbi Yehuda ben Meseir said that I am from a grandchild from one of those people that came back alive. And this is the tefillin that we had as an heirloom in my family. Okay, we're going to stop over here and continue this conversation tomorrow.
Sure.